In November 2021, the Louisiana Department of Transportation closed an interstate off-ramp for 4 hours, so a crew could repair the sign truss above it. The sign named the exit. The exit named a town called Ruddock. Ruddock has not existed since a hurricane took it apart in 1915. That ramp is in Louisiana, and it is not the strangest thing we found there. That place makes this list. So, do 11 others. A bayou lot holding 100 concrete angels, built by a man who walked away from them and was never seen again. A settlement of 14 houses standing on wooden pilings with no roads at all. Not bad roads, none. A quarter-acre cemetery that a chemical company says it owns. Stick with us to the end, because number 1 is a 2-lane road running straight out into open water toward an island that has lost 98% of itself. This channel goes looking for the places maps forgot. If that is your kind of thing, subscribe. Today, we are counting down 12 of the weirdest and most isolated towns in Louisiana. Number 12, Transennsylvania, East Carroll Parish. The vampire town that isn't. 10 miles south of Lake Providence, U.S. Highway 65 runs dead straight through flat delta farmland. Cotton and soybeans to the horizon. No hills, enormous sky. Then a water tower appears, and as you close the distance, you can see there is a black bat painted across the middle of it, about 165 feet above the road. The name is much older than the joke. A landowner in the early 19th century had studied at Transsylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky, and he transplanted the word onto his patch of Louisiana farmland. It sat there as a curiosity for 100 years. Then Bram Stoker's Vampire worked its way into American culture, and the community leaned all the way in. Bat on the tower, Dracula shirts in the general store, a bat postmark at the post office. Every October, people drive in from other states just to have their Halloween cards stamped there. The postmaster does not charge extra for the bat. The general store is closed now. Transsylvania Elementary stopped operating and was abandoned by 2005, and it sits derelict across from the tower. The joke has outlived the town that told it. Number 11, waterproof Tensas Parish. The town that kept running from the river Tensas is the least populated parish in Louisiana. 4,147 people at the 2020 census, scattered across cotton and soybean ground on the Mississippi's western bank. Waterproof sits in the south of it, roughly 17 miles north of Faraday, with 541 residents. The story locals tell about the name goes like this. In the 1,830 seconds, settlers bound for Texas kept quitting the journey and staying on the Louisiana side. One of them was Abner Smalley. A steamboat captain stopping for cordwood saw him standing on dry ground with floodwater all around him and called out that he was waterproof. Smalley put the name on his plantation and the town grew on top of it. The river spent the next century answering back. Banks caved in, floods came through. The settlement physically picked itself up and moved inland. Parish records say twice in 3 years. Other accounts say 3 moves in total. The original site of waterproof is under the Mississippi River. What is left is a village behind an earthen levee, farming land that needs fewer hands every decade. In 2010, nearly a quarter of residents were 60 or older. A steamboat captain made a joke, and the river took 100 years to deliver the reply. Number 10, Rayne, Acadia Parish. The Frog, capital with the wrong way graves. On the 9th of November 1970, NASA launched 2 bullfrogs into orbit from Wallops Island, Virginia, aboard a Scout rocket. The frogs came from Rayne. They were supplied by the Louisiana Frog Company. 20 were sent up for evaluation and narrowed to 4, 2 for the flight, 2 on standby. The mission studied the inner ear under weightlessness because a frog's balance mechanism is close to a human one. Rayne's congressman at the time, Edwin Edwards, later a 4-term governor, made sure the call came to his district. The satellite stayed up about a week. Recovery was never part of the plan. Rayne could supply them because it had been doing this since the 1882nd, when a local barkeep named Donat Puchu started selling bullfrogs to New Orleans restaurants. Jacques Weil and his brothers industrialized it in 1899 and shipped frog legs to New York and Paris. Then there is St. Joseph Catholic Cemetery No. 1, where the graves run north to south instead of the traditional east to west. Ripley's Believe It or Not featured it in 1967. The state historical marker beside it openly admits nobody knows why. The murals are still downtown, the festival still runs, and 2 frogs from here are still, technically, somewhere out there. Number 9. Fisher, Sabine Parish. The company town that refused to die, Western Louisiana, does not look like the rest of this list. No swamp, no marsh, rolling pine country at around 367 feet of elevation on U.S. Highway 171 between Leesville and Many. Fisher does not read as a ruin. It reads as a town that stopped. It was built between 1899 and 1901 by the Louisiana Longleaf Lumber Company, known as 4L, and named for its president, a Missouri lumberman called Oliver Williams Fisher. Between 1900 and 1920, Louisiana was one of the 3 largest lumber-producing states in the country, and companies cutting timber that fast had to manufacture entire towns to house the men doing it. Fisher was laid out on a grid of roughly 130 houses. The company built the church, the hospital, the school, the hotel, and an opera house, and owned every part of it. Workers were segregated by class and race, as they were in company towns everywhere. Towns like that were designed to be temporary. When the trees ran out, they went. Fisher did not, because in 1966, Boise Cascade bought the operation, and instead of clearing the place, subdivided it and sold the houses to the people already living in them. Then, the residents did something almost no company town has ever managed. They incorporated the village, formed a heritage foundation, and persuaded the railroad and the lumber company to hand over the historic core. Kansas City Southern gave up the depot in 1971. In 1972, Boise Southern conveyed 9.5 acres. Office building, commissary, opera house, post office, square and park. The transfer paperwork listed among the assets, the birds, the bees, and the grass thereon. In 1979, it went on the National Register of Historic Places. The old sawmill office is now City Hall. The commissary, which once sold everything from groceries to coffins, is an antique mall. 197 people live there. They bought their own town back, and then they held on to it. Number 8. Chauvin, Terrebonne Parish. The man who built 100 angels and walked away. In 1988, a bricklayer named Kenny Hill left his wife and 3 children in Springfield, Louisiana, and turned up alone in a shrimping village on Bayou Petit Caillou, about 60 miles south-southwest of New Orleans. He rented a bare lot for a couple of $100 a year. He pitched a tent and over time built himself a small cabin. Nobody was sure exactly how old he was. No birth certificate has ever been found. In 1990, without explaining himself to his landlord or anyone else, he started making people out of concrete. He did not stop for a decade. Roughly 100 figures went up along a brick-lined path winding through the lot. Angels, cowboys, soldiers, biblical scenes, and at least 7 versions of himself. Some angels had halos made from light bulbs. Some had black holes where their eyes should be. At the center, he built a lighthouse, 45 feet tall, out of about 7,000 bricks, studded with relief carvings. He turned down journalists repeatedly. The only explanation he ever gave was to an art professor, Dennis Sipierski, about a week before the end, that he had been told to build it so other people could learn from his sins. He would not say who had told him. In late December 1999 or early January 2000, an eviction notice went up on his door. Hill packed a knapsack, broke the head off one of his own Jesus statues, and left on foot. Neighbors offered him rides. He declined all of them. He has not been seen since. Above his kitchen sink, he had painted a sign in red, saying that hell was here and visitors were welcome. The first statue the public sees today is a self-portrait with no eyes, one hand pressed to its chest, blood running out from under it. The site was rescued, gifted to Nicholls State University, and reopened in 2002. The art department repaints the figures. It is free, open daily, sunrise to sunset. 100 faces are still standing in that yard, all of them waiting for a man who never came back. Number 7. Grand Bayou Indian Village, Plaquemines Parish, the village with no roads. There are no roads in Grand Bayou. Not poor roads, not seasonal roads. None. The houses stand on wooden pilings along the water, and the only way in or out for anybody is a boat. This is the home of the Atacapa Ishak Chawasha tribe, whose presence in the Plaquemines Delta goes back roughly 1,000 years. The village was never deliberately cut off. It simply predates roads. Residents still fish, shrimp, oyster, crab and trap, and forage wild celery, green onions, and a leafy green called morelle noir. They used to trap muskrat and preserve the meat in salt in oak barrels. As recently as the 1942, nearly 1,000 people lived there. Today, the village is about 14 homes and a small church, with roughly 15 families in permanent residence and about 40 people counted. Most of the tribe's estimated 400 members live elsewhere now. What emptied it was not the water the community was built on. It was what happened to the delta around them. Levees upriver cut off the sediment that had been building this land for centuries, and oil and gas canals dredged through the marsh, let salt water in. The high ground dissolved. The forests went. And because the tribe holds neither federal nor state recognition, it was left out of the rooms where Louisiana decides which communities get protected. The 2017 Coastal Master Plan offered Grand Bayou nothing, no levy, and no relocation. Either residents say they were tricked out of ownership of land they had lived on for centuries. Their situation has gone as far as a complaint to a United Nations Special Rapporteur. Meanwhile, scientists and policymakers from Ecuador, the Netherlands, Taiwan, Mexico, and Canada have all traveled here to study how the place survives. Every one of them had to come by boat. They are studying a community the state has already written off, and the community is still there. Number 6. Pilottown, Plaquemines Parish. The end of the road, where there is no road. Drive south from New Orleans until you reach Venice, which is the last road-accessible town in Louisiana. Then hire a boat and go another 10 miles downriver. That is where Pilottown sits, near Head of Passes, at the point where the Mississippi splits into 3 fingers and gives up on being a single river. It has never had a road. It has never needed one. The Mississippi's mouth shifts constantly, and for 3 centuries somebody has had to live down there to guide ships through it. The French built La Balise in 1699 and a 62-foot wooden pyramid in 1721 to mark the channel. A hurricane in September 1860 flattened it. The river moved its main channel anyway, and the pilots relocated upriver and built Pilottown instead. It became a genuine village on pilings. Families, cows, gardens, a general store, a bar with slot machines, all connected by a raised walkway running the length of a mile-long island, because the ground sits only a few feet above the river. Its job was the handoff. Bar pilots brought ships in from the Gulf and passed them to river pilots taking them up to New Orleans. About 500 people lived there at its peak in the late 1860s. Storms hit it repeatedly, and every time they rebuilt. And every time they rebuilt. One woman who worked in the kitchen at the pilot station had stayed through Betsy and through Camille because she believed Pilottown was the safest place there was. The water washed in and washed straight back out. During Katrina, it washed in and threatened her on the third floor, and she felt the whole building lift off its pilings and drop back down. She has never returned. Neither did the last 8 permanent residents. The Associated Branch pilots, headquartered there for over a century, rebuilt in Venice instead. Their old 3-story station is still down there, siding stripped away, cypress framing exposed to the weather. There is nobody at the bottom of the river anymore, only people passing through it. We opened this video with that interstate ramp at Ruddock, and we will get to what is under it shortly. Let us know in the comments if that one caught you off guard. If you are enjoying the deep dive, a thumbs up helps more people find these stories. Number 5. Bayou Corne, Assumption Parish. The day the swamp started bubbling. In the spring of 2012, people living along this quiet stretch of cypress swamp began noticing gas coming up through the water. It bubbled like a pot on a stove. Then came small tremors underground. For more than 2 months, state officials could not explain either one, and the company operating nearby publicly played down the idea that a sinkhole was likely. Under Assumption Parish sits the Napoleonville Salt Dome. Companies mine it by pumping water down to dissolve caverns out of the salt, which leaves enormous voids underground. One of those caverns, operated by Texas Brine on behalf of Occidental Chemical, had been worked too close to the dome's outer wall. That wall was already failing while the denials were being issued. Overnight, on the 2nd of August and 3rd, the roof gave way. Sediment and full-grown cypress trees dropped roughly 750 feet into the void. Crude oil and methane pushed up to the surface. Residents woke to the smell of oil through the whole community. Within hours, the governor had declared an emergency, and the parish had ordered an evacuation covering about 159 homes and roughly 350 people. The hole started at about 2.5 acres, roughly the footprint of a tennis court. It grew to around 37 acres, at least 750 feet deep. There is video of it, shot by the parish emergency office. A stand of towering cypress trees is drawn straight down into the water and disappears completely in seconds, as if they had never been planted there at all. Nobody died. No houses were swallowed. The freshwater bayou itself was not contaminated. What was lost was the community. Buyouts cleared most of the residential area. The last voluntary evacuation orders were not lifted until 2016, 4 years on. And by then, the people who tried to come back were dealing with damaged property and an economy that had gone with everyone else. Roughly a dozen residents remain, most of them elderly. The rest is mown lots, concrete slabs, and empty driveways, in a place people used to describe as somewhere you could go a long time without hearing a word. It is still that quiet. The reason has changed. Number 4. Morrisonville and Revial Town, Iberville Parish. The towns the chemical plants bought and deleted. After the Civil War, people freed from plantations along the Mississippi built their own towns on the ground they already knew. Morrisonville was founded in the 1872. At Revial Town, community members pooled money in 1881 and bought a tract of land for a burial ground. 80 years later, the petrochemical industry arrived on the same stretch of river. Today, there are roughly 150 plants and refineries along an 85-mile run between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and the industry needed space. Dow Chemical built a vinyl chloride plant next to Morrisonville in 1958. At first, a greenbelt separated the two. Then, in 1959, the plant bought town land, and it kept expanding until it covered 1,400 acres and filled every foot between the works and the houses. It got close enough that the plant's loudspeaker announcements could be heard inside people's homes. In the 1,980 seconds, chemical pollution turned up in the town's wells. Here is the part that tells you what this actually was. In 1989, just before a federal report on toxic emissions from the plant was due to be released, Dow announced it would buy every home and every acre in Morrisonville. Residents were relocated in 1990. Tuwar, a man who helped negotiate that relocation, later explained the logic plainly. A company can save millions in insurance premiums by creating a buffer zone around itself. All that is left of Morrisonville is a historical marker and the Nazarene Baptist Church Cemetery, a wooded island inside Dow's property. Revial town went the same way, and then it went further. A chemical facility was built around the 1881 cemetery in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The barbed wire fence the community had put up was taken down and replaced with chain link. After the 11th of September, a second perimeter fence went around the plant. Descendants who filed suit arrived to find the cemetery gate padlocked and a sign posting visiting hours. The company claimed it had owned the land since 1970, though it did not hold the deed. And a district court ruled that the corporation, not the descendants' own association, is in possession of the cemetery. The litigation stalled in 2021 when the lead plaintiff died. The cemetery is about 1/4 of an acre. Neat, above-ground tombs with a plastics plant filling the sky behind them. It is the only proof left that the town was ever there, and the families who built it need permission to walk in. Number 3. Ruddock and Cheniere, St. John the Baptist Parish. The ghost town with its own highway exit. Interstate 55 crosses the Manchac Swamp on a concrete trestle nearly 23 miles long, one of the longest bridges in the American interstate system, running about 50 feet above black water and drowned cypress. Somewhere in the middle of that crossing, a green sign announces Exit 7. Ruddock, take it, and the ramp drops you off the highway into the swamp at a boat launch, and that is the whole thing. In the 1,850 seconds, a rail line cut through this isthmus between Lake Maurepas and Lake Pontchartrain, and a chain of whistle-stop settlements grew along it. Cheniere, Wagram, Napton, Owl Bayou, Sharkey, Acres. Cheniere had been founded in 1836 by descendants of German colonists farming cabbage and beets and potatoes. The biggest of them was Ruddock, built by the Ruddock Cypress Company from 1892. Ruddock was a real boom town, and an odd one. The entire village stood on stilts above the water, with stilt-supported wooden sidewalks running its length and walkways branching off to 2-story houses. By 1910, it had 700 people, a telegraph office, a post office, a boarding house, and a saloon. The mill burned in 1902 and was rebuilt. A tropical storm in 1909 brought 15-foot tides and killed 350 people across the region. Then, on the 29th of September, 1915, a Category 4 hurricane came ashore, with winds recorded up to 145 miles an hour, at the time the strongest ever documented in the region. Nearly every building in New Orleans was damaged. In Ruddock, people sheltered in the schoolhouse and the rail station. The station came apart, and the surge out of Lake Pontchartrain took them. A train trying to evacuate found the track washed out toward New Orleans and washed out toward Manchac, and survivors ended up kneeling in rising water inside the caboose. Accounts of the local death toll range from 28 to about 60. By morning, Ruddock, Napton, and Cheniere were gone, and the swamp moved back in. You will hear that a woman named Julia Brown cursed the town and took it with her when she died. She was real. A black landowner and herbalist, the community healer in a place with no doctor, who died the day the storm arrived. The rest is folklore that grew over a century. An investigation of the local papers and heritage records found nothing to support the version people tell. Now, the documented part is stranger anyway. More than a century after the town was destroyed, the state still maintains a signed off-ramp for it, and in 2021 closed that ramp for 4 hours to repair the sign. Louisiana is still pointing drivers toward a town that has been under the swamp since 1915. Number 2. Cheniere Caminada, Jefferson Parish, one house left standing. On the morning of the 2nd of October, 1893, a fishing village of roughly 1,500 people, ceased to exist. It sat on a low oak-covered ridge at the mouth of Barataria Bay, just west of Grand Isle, and it was thriving. Creoles from New Orleans, Acadians from Lafourche Parish, Italian immigrants, Germans and Prussians, fishermen and oystermen with enormous families, devout Catholics who went to Mass on Sunday and to dances on Thursdays and Saturdays. They supplied the seafood for New Orleans restaurants. They were also expert weather readers. 10 hurricanes had come ashore near Caminada between 1831 and 1893, and the fishermen and oystermen had predicted every single one of them by reading the water. The 1893 storm gave them nothing. It formed in the Western Caribbean in late September, brushed the Yucatan, regained strength over the Gulf, and turned north. It came ashore in the early hours of the 2nd of October, as what modern reanalysis puts at a Category 4. Winds around 130 to 140 miles an hour, driving a surge of at least 16 feet across a village with nowhere to climb. Every weather instrument in its path was destroyed. There was no complete record of what the wind and rain actually did. When it lifted, 779 of the village's 1471 residents were dead or swept out to sea. Of 300 homes, one was still standing. Across the whole region, the storm killed an estimated 2,000 people, which makes it the deadliest hurricane in Louisiana history, and the third deadliest in the continental United States, behind only Galveston in 1900 and Okeechobee in 1928. 62 people survived under a single collapsed house. When John Frederick Rebstock's walls imploded, the roof came down on the highest ground on the island, and everyone underneath it lived. A biology professor at Nicholls State University tells the same story about his own great-great-grandfather's family. Kate Chauvin used to summer at Grand Isle and attended Mass at Cheniere Caminada. She wrote a short story about the place over 3 days that October as the news broke nationally. 6 years later, she set the awakening on the island next door, in the year before the storm. A few families tried to rebuild. Later hurricanes finished what the first one started, and the village never came back. The cemetery is still there, with a hurricane monument in front of it, and Grand Isle still holds a day of remembrance. 1,500 people lived on that ridge, and what you go there to look at now is the absence of them. Number 1. Isle de Jean-Charles, Terrebonne Parish. The island that lost 98% of itself. You turn off the highway and onto a 2-lane road, and within a minute, there is water on both sides of you. No shoulder, no guardrail. In places, the pavement sits maybe a foot above the surface, so that driving it does not feel like driving, it feels like being on a boat. The horizon is on your left and your right at the same time. Dead oaks stand in the marsh, stripped to bare gray branches. Then the road ends, and there is a cluster of houses up on stilts, a fire station, a small dock, and wind coming across open water with nothing to break it. Most of the houses are empty shells. There is no church here anymore, and no grocery store. That is what the silence is made of. In 1955, when tracking began, this island covered more than 22,000 acres. Around 320 remain. The tribe did not choose it. The Ile de Jean-Charles, Biloxi, Chitimacha, Choctaw were pushed onto this ridge of marsh in the early 1,800 seconds, precisely because nobody else wanted it, and the Indian Removal Act of the 1,830 seconds drove more of them down here. And it worked. For a century and a half, it was 22,000 acres of trapping, fishing, and farming ground, reachable only by pirogue, with a school, a church, and 300 families on it. Their children were denied public education until 1952. Island Road, the only link to the mainland, was not built until the early 1,950 seconds, and it floods so routinely that emergency services cannot be guaranteed. Two things dissolved the land. Levees upriver cut off the sediment that had built this delta for thousands of years. and the oil industry cut thousands of miles of canals through the marsh, which let salt water in and accelerated the subsidence. In 2016, the federal government agreed to pay to move everyone. It was the first program of its kind in the continental United States, and it made these residents the first federally funded climate migrants in the country. He awarded Louisiana $92 million, of which $48.3 million was designated for this resettlement. The site chosen was a 515-acre former sugarcane field, about 40 miles north, near Gray. It was named the New Isle Move-Ins, began in August 2022, and as of the autumn of 2024, 37 residents or families had relocated. That should be the happy ending. It is not how the tribe describes it. Chief Albert Naquin said in 2018 that the state had taken the project over and changed it, and that it no longer protected the community's culture or way of life. He refused to move. Reporting based on internal documents and hundreds of emails found state officials dismissive of tribal concerns, and found that mention of the tribe's role was minimized and in places removed from the project's story once the money had been awarded. And then this. The state declared the island unsafe and barred participants from living on their own properties or repairing them. It then spent millions reinforcing the road out to it and added parking, docks, and recreational fishing amenities, which drew interest from developers who want to build cabins for hunters and anglers, alongside the wrecked homes of the people who were told to leave. The last households have been going since Hurricane Ida tore through in 2021. A deputy chief once explained the pattern simply. After every hurricane, somebody leaves because their house has been blown away. Drive out there on a still day, and the road is passable. The water is flat, and the wind does not stop. 200 years of a people's history is down to a strip of land 2 miles long, and somebody is already drawing up plans for the view. There are more of these than we could fit. Flooded settlements, sawmill towns, whole communities that only exist now as a name on a map. My own favorite is Fisher, because it is the one place on this list where the people actually won. Which entry caught you off guard, and which Louisiana town should we have included? Tell us in the comments and subscribe if you want the next one.